esforço de compreensão das ciências básicas e das ciências sociais aplicadas, para que consigamos superar os problemas da produção material da cidade, nas suas conexões com a tecnologia, com as ciências básicas, com a governança e com a transformação da cidade. Então, agora essa mesa vai ser temática sobre o efeito das mudanças climáticas nas questões do clima. Regina, a mesa é toda sua.
Queria agradecer a presença de todos, agradecer pelo convite para estar aqui, agradecer a Ana, o Renato e o pessoal restante do pessoal da organização. Agora a gente vai ter, então, dar início a uma importante mesa, efeito das mudanças climáticas em cidades, precipitações e fenômenos atmosféricos. Eu vou convidar 3 professores para compor essa mesa, que vão fazer as respectivas palestras. Professor Edmilson Dias de Freitas, do IAG-USP, professor Pedro Multi, da Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Norte, e professora Lloyd de Abreu, daqui do Mackenzie.
Você sabe onde está a apresentação de vocês? No meu?
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Edmilson Freitas. I'm a professor at the Institute of Astronomy, Geophysics, and Atmospheric Science from the University of São Paulo. And I would like, first of all, to thank the organization of this event for inviting me to be here. It's a pleasure. And thank you all, the audience, for being here. I'm going to talk about one of the main problems that we have, especially over huge cities, such as the case of the city of São Paulo and the metropolitan area of São Paulo, which is especially during the summertime, the thunderstorms, the severe weather that happens in all this region that comprise the metropolitan area of São Paulo. So I will follow this summary. First of all, I will define the part of the domain that we are when we are talking about thunderstorms, which is the mesoscale. When we talk about cities, we have this effect called as urban heat island, which is mostly the cause of the thunderstorms. Some extreme events, and as we are talking about climate and changes in climate, I will show you some simulations considering the urban area growing. And finally, I will close this presentation with some suggestions of mitigation. So, not sure if you can see from behind, but here we have a very known work by Orlansky in 1975, which defines different scales of time and space and puts some meteorological phenomena inside these scales. So here in this red square, we have what we call the mesoscale. It's the interval between microscale phenomena, like turbulence, and large-scale phenomena, such as hurricanes and planetary waves. So inside this mesoscale interval, we have a second division where we have the thunderstorms, we have urban effects, and internal gravity waves. Our laboratory, a natural one, is the metropolitan area of São Paulo. It's a a large conglomerate of cities, 39 municipalities, an area of 8,000 kilometers square. Part of it is totally urbanized. You can see here in this red center of the domain is the urbanized part of the metropolitan area of São Paulo. A lot of people, 23 million people, and a lot of vehicles too. And this is important because both population and vehicles are heat sources too. Okay, you have metabolism producing heat. You have the engines of the vehicles producing heat. So besides the urban structure, you also have anthropogenic sources of heat. When you consider a place like São Paulo, Angelica told that you are going to use different places here in São Paulo. Here we have favela. I don't know how do you call favela. Slums. It's a slum. Favela, close to Morumbi. An industrial area in the north part of the city. The center of the city, the Vale do Anhangabaú, is the first one there. And you have a huge park, which is Ibirapuera. So you can see inside a city, you can have different types of urbanization. This is really important because, first of all, the surface has different types of communication with the atmosphere. The transfer processes of heat are different depending on what you have in the surface. For models, this is really hard to do. You have to identify in some way these differences in the surface. If you consider the metropolitan area of São Paulo, you have actually more than 20 different types of urbanization. So it's something that you have to consider to take in account the processes that are important for thunderstorms. When we talk about the urban structure, you see the complex structure that interacts with the solar radiation, and it will be also a source of storage of heat, which will contribute for the thunderstorms. This is a very old result of mine that shows the difference in temperature, the surface temperature, the first levels of the atmosphere close to the surface, showing the differences that we can see in the metropolitan area, showing differences of around 4 degrees Celsius in the center of the city compared to the neighborhood, which is mostly vegetated. And why this is important? In this picture, we have some examples of the relationship between the urban sprawl, the population growth, and the effects on precipitation. We have here a series of precipitation from 1932, collected in Água Funda, which is an observatory of our institute since the present. And in this picture here, we can see two things, and they are very related. One is the population growth, and the other one is the urban sprawl. You can see here different periods of time showing how the metropolitan area of São Paulo has grown. So this first one was in 1884, and you have afterwards 1910, something like that. I think it's almost 15 years. Each figure shows a difference of 15 years. So you can see how the city grows in this area. And it's very linked to the population growth. And one thing that was really interesting, it's happening now, people from architecture know that a lot. You can see that here you have a crossing in this figure, showing that the population is growing more than the urban area. What's that? It's something that we see all around the metropolitan area. The change of small houses by buildings. So the area is not growing as fast as it was before, but the population is growing because now instead of one house, you have a building with at least 200 families. So it's something that is happening really fast. And here you can see the effects of this growing on the precipitation rate. We have a slope showing an increase of 5.5 millimeters a year. So it's something that we have to be concerned. How it happens? You have the heat in the surface, and for cloud formation, you need basically two things: heat and moisture. In a place like São Paulo, the moisture usually comes from the ocean. Renato said something that I told him some years ago, and I just have to make it more precise. Most of the moisture that comes from the ocean and hits the urban area will be transformed in a cloud, and this cloud will precipitate. Most of the rain will reach the surface in this region. But some of it can cross the city and go to the countryside of the country. The thing is, the precipitation that falls inside the urban area will not be used for people consume, for example. So it's wasted water, which will cause a lot of problems, as you know. Here you can see the process of formation of a cloud, which will be, with time, develop more, and will be transformed in what we call a supercell. For example, one like this of the next, like this one. This one was photographed from the north part of São Paulo, looking at the east part. Most of the thunderstorms that uses the sea moisture will happen in that way, from the east to the north part of the city. So it's a beautiful cloud, incredible amounts of energy involved in this cloud. And besides it's beautiful, it's terrible at the same time, because when you have something like that, you have the consequences in the surface. Lots of floods in important areas of São Paulo. This one was very known one because it happened in a tunnel in the middle of the Anhangabaú Valley, and lots of cars were floating inside the tunnel. The one from the Marginals, which used to be very common every summer. So it's a lot of problems, and we have to be careful and see what we can do to avoid this problem. One concern, or a lot of concerns, is the possibility that this urban area can grow even more. This was a simulation made in 2011, showing a possible growth of the urban area, showed by this yellow part of the figure, which is almost the hypothesis of considering that all the 39 municipalities of São Paulo would be changed by vegetation to some type of urban structure. So we used this simulation, which was made by Andrea Young from, at that time she was in the Unicamp group. Now she is working with us at USP. So what we did was to put this in an atmospheric model and see what happens when we change the surfaces by urban structures in a case of thunderstorm that happened in São Paulo. This was a PhD thesis from Andrea Bender, you can change, and was published in Climatic Change, you can change. Was part of a thematic project from FAPESP called SOS Chuva. And what we did was to consider that the, all the 39 municipalities were actually urbanized in some way, which is a very extreme and impossible case. But that would be the worst scenario for a thunderstorm formation. So we simulate that. This was the case that we simulated. This is the comparison between the surface station that measures precipitation. This was the result of the control simulation showing the actual land use for the time of this event, which happens in 2013. And this was the result of the scenario considering the urban growth for 2030. The one that I just showed you, which considers all the municipalities as urban without vegetation. So you can see the increase of precipitation, not only in terms of quantity or amounts of precipitation, but the area that was reached by this thunderstorm event. So it's something that we have to be concerned, but the question is, this growth can really happen? And actually, it doesn't. Why? Because we have protected areas, we have regulations that prevent the urban growth. So we did it again, but now considering something that is more real or more close to reality. In this figure, so you can see it's growing. You can see here the year, and you can see that the urban areas are growing all over the domain. We did that from 2015 up to 2050. And here you can see the difference. It's not that much. It's really far from the other scenario that we simulated before. But is it enough to increase the precipitation in the area? Let's see. We did another simulation considering the new scenario, and this is the result. In the first panel here, we have the control simulation, which was the Hebrew case. And the other three panels show different steps of the urban growing. One is the increase of anthropogenic heat. The other one is verticalization, or the change of vegetation by urban structures. And the third one is the sum of the other two. First, it's not linear. You don't have a linear response for that. But what we can see here, if we compare this one with this one, we clearly can see that the amount of precipitation increases a lot. And there is one thing that is really important for urban areas, because in urban areas we have people. And what happens, the most significant result here is that when we compare the different amounts of precipitation of that thunderstorm, you will see that the small amounts of precipitation are not being increased. But when you look at precipitations larger than 50 millimeters, which is enough to cause floods, it's growing. So that's the main point here. We increase the amount of precipitation, but even more important is the precipitation rate, because 50 millimeters of precipitation in one day is one thing. The water just flows, and it's okay. But 50 millimeters in 1 hour, it's not possible to drain. The drainage system will not work. The sewer system will not work. So you have floods. This is just one possibility of trying to mitigate the effects of urban heat islands, which is the inclusion of vegetation in the area. You don't need to build large parks You just have to increase the vegetation along the roads, for example. It's not something easy to do. It's very difficult. You have other problems, for example, when the trees fall over the electrical system, for example, or over a car or someone. But we did a simulation considering a 25% increase of vegetation area. Based on the real one, we increased 25% of the vegetation. And the result is a decrease of, it depends on the place. Some places the effect will be higher, but it's able to reduce the temperature in around 2 and 2.5 degrees. If you remember the other figure that I showed you, it's almost the effect of an urban heat island. So vegetation is a very important and efficient way to diminish the effects of urban heat island. So some conclusions: the population is growing as well as the cities. Urban effects are likely to increase, and these have impacts on weather. I didn't talk about it, I just focus on the summertime, but during the winter we have the air pollution problem, which is linked to the urban heat island. And it has, of course, impacts on quality of life. I showed you results from models that are very powerful tools to show you different scenarios. These models can give you important insights of what can happen in the future. But of course, we have to see these results with some care because models are not perfect, okay? They are approximate way of showing the real world. So that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Edmilson. We don't have time for questions right now. I'd like to invite Professor Pedro for the next presentation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pedro. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here representing not only the Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte, along with Professor Venerando, but also representing the Department for Climate and Atmospheric Sciences of our university, especially given the partnership that we've been solidifying in the past few months, as Professor Maria de Fátima explained earlier, in the context of the Climapolis project that is being developed along all the national network of researchers in Brazil. So the idea here, when I was invited and I regarded that the thematic of the event was actually brought me back memories because well, I consider myself a climate scientist nowadays, but at the beginning of my career I actually worked a lot in sanitary engineering, designing sewage systems and also drainage systems. And it was a moment that I could reflect upon what I know nowadays about climate and climate change and these things, and also the view I had in the past regarding drainage systems and urban infrastructure and these kinds of things. So I tried to make a presentation that would cover these topics and cover how climate change and urban infrastructure design could improve each other and learn from each other maybe, and how to develop this further. So I brought a study case from the city of Natal actually. I make this question a little provocative and actually a question that surely we all have already asked ourselves. If not, we wouldn't be here. I think this kind of event appears and is needed because of this kind of question. So urban infrastructure and heavy rainfall, are we ready for what is to come? And when I ask that, I'm referring to climate change. Are we ready for it? And I bring the case of the city of Natal. You can pass, please. Yeah. In these 15 minutes, se for o caso, pode mudar para o PowerPoint. Pronto. In these 15 minutes, I will try to, well, maybe reformulate that question, but also raise at least two important questions and important points of discussion here. Okay, so I will base my presentation on this study. It was published in the Urban Climate by Daniele. Daniele is a fellow colleague in the postgraduate program we have in Rio Grande do Norte, but she's a professor at Piauí, actually, the Federal University of Piauí, but it was a paper that was developed with our team and our research team in Natal. So I use this work actually as a conducting thread towards our two main discussions that I would like to bring here. So we actually, in this paper, what we did was a probability approach for the occurrence of extreme events, extreme rainfall in the city of Natal. So we based solely on probabilistics and extreme theory, extreme value theories in statistics to evaluate the occurrence of these heavy rainfalls in cities, and also try to relate this with the occurrence of natural disasters in the city, okay? So for those who don't know the city of Natal, it is somewhat like this. We are in the northeast region of the country, in that corner over there, okay? We are not at all a huge city as São Paulo. We are talking about maybe 900,000, 1 million people if we consider the metropolitan region around it. So it's really, we are talking about a much smaller scale here. But we also have different types of urbanization process in our city. We have, for example, that blue sector over there is much more touristic, much more a little bit more developed, with bigger avenues, but we also have the green section over there, the western portion, which is much less verticalized over here. We basically have houses and some commerce and residential area, okay? And then we have the two possibly most interesting regions, which is the red one, which is the east portion of the city, because we have the historical center of Natal right there. We also have a business center, more developed region with luxury buildings, but we also have a lot of social contracts, which is really typical of Brazil. For example, in this picture here, we see these tall buildings right in the coastline. They are luxury building for wealthy people, and right behind that, we have a much smaller community with people with less income, and so it's really contrasting to have these kinds of dynamics in the city of Natal. And across the bridge that is over here, so on the other side of the river, on the Potengi River, we have the north zone, which is a zone with much less income, much more vulnerable region with more violence indexes and less development needs index, which we can barely see, but it is the region over there and across the bridge. It's huge, actually. It's really dense, and a lot of people living there, much more vulnerable, and it's actually across the bridge, if we talk about the continental part of the city of Natal. Okay, so this is a brief overview of the city of Natal, and we talk a little bit about how these disasters that I will show this map in a few slides. Okay, so what we did in this study actually was, as I said, to model these extreme climate events regarding daily precipitation. We know this is it has some kinds of flaws because ideally, if we're talking about urban infrastructure, maybe hourly data would be much more interesting to work, since we have design of drainage systems, for example, that rely on hourly precipitation, not necessarily daily precipitation, as Professor Edmilson just commented on. Okay, and we associated these results with the flash floods, mainly flash floods and floods in general in the cities, and also landslides that occurred in that period of approximately 30 years and a little bit more. And we used this extreme value theory, which returned to us the return period and the return level of extreme rainfall, which are parameters that are crucial for at least traditional urban system designs for drainage, for example. We always have to rely upon a given return period and a return level of precipitation that will define the risk we are taking with a given traditional drainage solution, for example. And then we use the natural disaster data of the CEMADEM, which is the center, the national center for the monitoring of disasters and alerts in Brazil. Okay. So, well, most of people here probably know what is the return period and the return level, but I think it's important to more clearly define it in this scenario of in this urban context, this urban infrastructure context. Sorry. So, what basically the return period is the estimated level, average time actually that we have to wait between two given events of a certain magnitude. So we're talking about a precipitation of, I don't know, 100 millimeters in a day, for example. How long it will take for that same event occurs another time. And that is crucial for urban design of these types of drainage solutions. So how long can we expect to wait until this event occur again? And if you take this definition in engineering terms, we are talking about the risk we are willing to take when we define a return period and a return level for a given infrastructure design. So how often will this technical solution eventually fail? And how bad it will be when it does. So it's some things that must have be taken into consideration. And of course, engineers throughout the years have always taken it into consideration. But the question that I will raise afterwards is it changing? Should we change the way we think about the return level and return period? Okay, and we see that in a bit. So this diagnosis that we conducted in this study actually showed us, here is just a probabilistic portrait of precipitation, of daily precipitation in Natal. So we see that May, June, and July are critical periods regarding heavy rainfall. So we see, for example, June, we have almost 50% of probability of rainfall higher than 90 millimeters occurring. Well, 90 millimeters is quite a bit, actually. As Edmilson said, if this 9 millimeters occur in 1-2 hours, it's catastrophic. If it occurs towards the day, it can be managed, maybe. Okay, but in daily means, in daily terms, we have this scenario. So June and July are pretty intense months, critical months regarding heavy rainfall. Okay, and we can go further. Actually, this image shows only for 30, 60, and 90%, 90 millimeters rainfall. But if we observe, for example, for rainfalls of 120 millimeters. In June, we have a 20% actually of probability of occurrence of these types of rainfall. So we are talking about a lot of rainfall that is quite likely to occur. Actually, 20% is not terrible. We're talking about once every 5 years, maybe, a rainfall higher than 120 millimeters in the city of Natal. Okay. And most funnily, or not funnily at all, but if we look at the regions of vulnerable regions in the city of Natal, events, which couldn't be more wrong, actually. And this is the second discussion I would like to bring. But the first one is what can we learn from this? So regarding the return period, the return level, that is the first question I would like to pose here and to raise a discussion, which is, are we designing this infrastructure, if we are using the return period and return level, are we designing that correctly? I mean, this is something we've been using for the last, I don't know, decades of engineering knowledge to use the return level and the return period as a typical parameter for risk-taking in this kind of situation. But this is because we had the notion that the climate was stationary, meaning that the climate, if we know how the climate works in a 30 years period, we can assume that on average it will work like that. And it won't change in 6 years from now. That was the notion, but climate change is something that was brought upon in the end of the 90s, basically, and gained strength mainly after the 2000s. So what we have now is that we know that the climate is non-stationary. So if you take a climatology of 30 years and we define a return period and a return level, this is probably not going to be the same return period level in a few decades. So maybe if we design a urban system now using a return period of 20 years, maybe in 10 years, this return period of 20 years will be 10. And then, and what will we do? That's the reflection that we should think about. And area also for the next few years, regardless of the climate scenario we face. Okay, so we must think of maybe different approaches to define these parameters as risk-taking parameters for the design of urban solutions for drainage systems. Okay, and just to finish, the second reflection I would like to raise here, the discussion point. Oh yes, and the question that I said we would reformulate is, well, are we ready for what's to come, or are we ready? That I previously shown. I mean, the disaster didn't occur in the most vulnerable regions, but of course, if we talk to people and we know how the dynamics of the city works, we know that the most vulnerable people were most affected by these disasters because they couldn't go to work, they were probably stuck at home, and maybe even if their street didn't flood, probably their life were much more affected than the other people. So it rises also to the need, and I think it is the central point of the Climapolis project, to design research, to think about the problems and design the solutions, not as the academic scientists alone, but also talking to people and seeing what are their views on their own vulnerability and how they would probably, how they can help and be a part of the design of these solutions for these people. And so this is another interesting point when you talk about urban vulnerability and disasters and the occurrence of precipitation and other extreme climate events that could occur in different types of cities. So basically these two main questions, but I think there are a lot of other questions that could arise from this discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pedro. Now, Professor Lloyd.
Good morning. My name is Lloyd Vieira de Abreu Harbis. I'm a professor from FAO Mackenzie.
Existem algumas coisas que estão em português, outras em inglês, mas vou fazer uma melhor. Gostaria de complementar algumas coisas sobre o departamento urbano, mas na visão de arquiteta, porque sou arquiteta e não meteorologista, que tem
climate, specifically in this transformation
nessa transformação das cidades, mas eu gostaria de mostrar a vocês como os arquitetas podem cooperar e como podemos planejar as áreas urbanas para melhorar a situação, para a adaptação, ou para atender essas alterações.
to show you about something that's very important to look in the cities is topography. It's about material that you use in the facades and the pavements, and the presence of vegetation and urban obstacles as buildings or areas that you open as squares, something like that. And this change a lot in solar radiation, that these materials can make changes in the surrounds, and the ventilation in the urban ventilation. You can pass. And my approach is about micro scale, because we make a small change. You can change all the things in the city. We saw a lot of modifications about we made a lot of simulations, but we need to make this simulation to try to connect how the best solution to adapt the climate in the city. So the solar radiation in urban area is very important, because this make a lot of change. And when you change the materials or put some vegetation, obvious, you change this situation, this climate, and all this interference like that. This is a part of the area that we are studying in the sea and climate. We can see the parts that you have a vegetation. You have a little modification in the area, in the heating in these areas. But you don't, we can look just for if there is a vegetation or not, but we need to see if these areas are compact with huge high buildings, or it's compact with small buildings. But we need to find the best solution for this area. In this area that you can see here, in red, it's Paraisópolis. We can see that this is a very interesting area to study, because you have topography very deep, and we have similar materials that they use in the buildings, and there are a lack of vegetation there, and you need to look specific in this area to make something to make this change. But next one, the first things that we need to do is understand the local climate. I made this analysis, and not in the last year, but along of years, because when you look here, we can see that the air temperature make change, but there are tendencies to increase, and this is a very interesting thing that we can do, because the changes happen specifically in the during the night, because the heat island. Next one. This is the solar radiation. You can see the behavior during the years. It's not changed so much. Next one. The air velocity is very interesting, because when you have a lot of precipitations, we can see that the wind can be increasing. And for this is a problematic situation when you have a lot of trees, and you have a wind, and this wind broke these trees. But in my opinion, it's better broke trees than you have a serious problem in the buildings. So in my opinion, it's better. You have these trees and trees broken, then you have problems in the all city because you don't have vegetation to control this event. Next one. And this about humidity and precipitation. You can see the difference, but you can see that in some months you have more precipitation than another areas, and you have this was modification during the years, but you need to look how this has happened in the last years and what the tendency to make some modification and try to and think I need to make changes in these certain areas to be better to have a better city. This is a study that I made in the past, and we compare Santos, São Paulo, Campinas, and the variation of temperature, the frequencies, and we can see that in Santos, it's more how can I say, it's more warm than in other cities, but we have a situation that the more humidity, more temperature there. In São Paulo, this is the panorama of climate that we have in these cities. And I would like to combine these cities because we need to understand how the influence of the cities that is in the coast, in the continental cities. And it can explain a lot about the weather there. Next one. The another analysis that we made is about PET. PET is a thermal comfort index. And we can see the difference because sometimes if you look just for air temperature, you don't know exactly how the people feeling about the weather, because we know about the weather, the modifications about the weather, but we just know about the precipitation, the flow, and the other things that has happened. But there are a lot of health problems that happen because we don't have a thermal comfort in these areas, and especially during the certain hours of day. And sometimes this is very problematic because if you don't have a control of solar radiation and you don't have wind in the cities, you have a problem not only because this make a precipitation, but in the health of the people. This is another question that I always made, how we can improve the urban ventilation. And we need to study how our propose in the city, if you are gonna open a street or you have a density with a lot of high buildings, how this impact in the urban ventilation. And we need to study this, specifically because this make a lot of modification in a lot of aspects, not outdoor, but indoor also. The another things is about scales. I told you in the beginning of my presentation that I will look more about I take care more about the micro scales than the mesoscale or macro scale, because I think these small modifications can have a lot of good modifications in the urban climate specific. And how you can use the vegetation, specific trees, because trees have a lot of good things to do in our cities. Specific, not on we can do little things in planting tree in the streets, but we cannot look just for the trees in the street, but the squares in the um, in private areas also. It can improve a lot of, you can collaborate a lot of, and these things we need to talk about the population. We need to talk that if you have a tree in private places, in your house, for example, you can improve, you can make the water of the rain absorb in the soil. A lot of things better, not only thermal comfort, but there are a lot of things good about trees. Another situation, very important that tree can bring for urban climate is solar radiation attenuated by trees. In my doctor work, I study different trees, the correct trees that you can plant in cities, and you can see that there are some trees, specifically Cassiopeia fetorobus, this one. Also, it means Sibipiruna. We have these trees planted in old city in São Paulo, and a lot of it's the best one because there are small leaves, and these leaves can filtrate more and more the solar radiation. And there are a lot of people that doesn't like about these trees because these trees has a serious problem. There are a lot of the leaf fall down. I think it's my sorry. I think this it's a serious problem because there are a lot of people that doesn't like these trees. I doesn't care about the leaves, and I need to clean these leaves. But if you look, it's more important. This is the minimal things that we can do. Another thing is about this is in micro scale, not in mesoscale results, about the air temperature and PET, physiological temperature equivalent, the improvement that we can make in our surroundings. If you look at the Cassiopeia, you can see that during the day we have a lot of benefits. We have thermal comfort during all the afternoon. It's very good things. It's similar that happen when you walking in streets with a lot of trees. We doesn't have feel very hot. It's a good benefit, specifically for the people that are walking there. And another point is about the radiation. These trees can control the radiation in the soil. Next one. And here it's some possibilities to collect data in the microscale. This is a meteorological station, mobile. We can walk in with all these equipments. We have a global sensor. We have air temperature and humidity data logger. We have radiation, solar radiation, and we have a wind collected. And we are walking and taking the data to analyze how the urban infrastructure influencing the local climate. This is another study in Santos that we made in Santos, and we are walking in the beach into in some streets with a lot of trees, and we look at the different that we can see the sky view factor. Here we are in the beach. Here we have inside of trees. And that one we have trees and at the P3 we have trees and buildings. In this one we have just trees, just buildings. And we can look that this condition change. Here in another case, when you look specific, when I have trees and different types of trees and palms, and we can see that palms also can collaborate with the thermal comfort or reduce the temperatures and mitigation the urban climate. Another one. In this one, we can see also the thermal pictures, and we can see the difference during the walking and during the day, and how it can change. And for this, I told you, if you plant trees is better for the heating, and we can improve very much the air temperature. Next one. This is another study made here in São Paulo, and when we make a transept, my students walking in the Jardim da Luz and walking in that tree, inside that tree of this street, another street without trees, and another one we have a result. And we have this map in this one. And we can see that in the park, we have a better situation than when you mix this situation, trees and buildings, but it's better than if we don't have trees. Here, here we have another situation that we can combine here we don't have trees, but we have a solar protection. But if you question people there, they are gonna told you that prefer walking inside the trees. Another one. Here is some possibilities, some simulations about the urban changes if you insert trees. Next one. This is something that we plan to do. Make this. You can pass. Make these fixed points to try to understand how these things happen in this area. And I bring here something that we are developing, and in this moment we are testing. We have thermal cameras. We have a windy collector, but it's walking or by car, and data logger. Here is sensor thermal and air about air temperature and humidity, and this is collect also the GPS, and the people can walk in, and we can collect air temperature, humidity, and GPS, and we can use this with this protection here, and we can have more. It's more easy to have this distribution of air temperature in here. But obviously we need to do this during just 1 hour, because we have a lot of difference. If you, it's very dynamic, the distribution of air. But we would like to have a possibility to make, how can I say, monitoring air temperature monitoring during a lot of places to understand how this is really happen in local climate. And another possibility is this: when you have, we bring this data to simulation, we can simulation the air temperature, the air distribution, another one, and the thermal comfort with and without trees. And you can see how this can improve if you have trees, and if you compare it with situation without trees. So this is the end of my presentation, and I would like to conclude that it's very important to look the climate, the historic data, but also it's the monitoring data in the to approach the local climate is the best solution to planning the best modifications into the cities, for the city can grow, but grow in the good way. Thank you so much.